Like, like to call the Board of Selectmen public hearing on cannabis and the potential ordinance related to cannabis to order. I think we can dispense with the reading of the call. Everyone pretty much understands why we're here. I want to thank everybody for coming out. This is not the first time we've been in a room together. It is the first time we've been able to do it with folks participating via Zoom. I appreciate you taking the time to come out and express your opinions on the decision that the Board of Selectmen will be making relative to cannabis and its place or not in place here in Guilford. Tonight we'll open it up first to public comment in terms of how folks feel. And even though the ordinance that is being contemplated specifically is an outright ban, town council has said, based on the way he wrote he put the notice and wrote it, there are a variety of options we can take from here at most likely before the end of June, because we have a moratorium in place, which most of you are aware of, that ends on June 30th. So we will need to take some action, because if we elect to, I hate to say this because we've done it a couple of times, kick the can down the road a little bit and continue with the moratorium, but we need to do so before the expiration of the current moratorium, because, excuse me?
Why do we need to?
John, this is not a public forum. You will have an opportunity to speak when you get a chance. Because if we fail to act one way or the other, it will be an as of right use, and we will have absolutely no control over how many or where any of the 11 categories of cannabis business can take place. So that is why the June 30th date is important. Okay. I think most of you know we have conducted a survey with Zen City, a municipal software company and polling operation. I won't go into the details of that. They were available on the website, but they were pretty clear in terms of percentages. Folks can argue with methodology on polling. We need to look no further than presidential polling over the last few years. Who was favored to win, who actually won, and that kind of thing. However, it was a best effort. It was an honest effort by the town to try to get a feel for the community's temper in terms of where they felt on the issue. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to public comment, and I'm not going to say everybody in favor has to speak first or everybody who's opposed has to speak. And as I've said at other forums like this, Guilford has long been known for its civil discourse. And I would anticipate that civility will rule the day or the evening, as it would be here tonight. There will be no derision of people's opinions, no interrupting people. I will not tolerate that, and I don't think my fellow board members will as well. So this is a conversation where people are free to express their opinions, and to the best of our ability, we'll try to answer some questions, which is why I wanted Attorney Barrett here, and he may well be here shortly. So the way we do this is you come up and speak. That the chair at the end would probably be the most appropriate one. You give your name and address for the record, and if we could, let's try to limit it to 3 minutes, if that works. And then if everyone has exhausted their 3 minutes and there is folks who may be willing to speak again, I think we could certainly let folks here. But what I don't want that to turn into is a he said, she said. Jane Kirkpatrick and what is his name, Shane Alexander, for those of us in the room, I remember those Saturday Night Live episodes. With that, anyone, and I'll try to sprinkle it between those in the room and those on Zoom. Tracy, I would leave it to you to keep track of who puts their hands up first about speaking. So, well, we've got one in the room right now. You can't see there, but Tracy, if you would keep track of those who are on Zoom who are desirous of making comments.
I will.
Sir, you're up first.
Thank you very much.
You're first.
My name is Matthew Rader, 32 Chaffinch Island Road in Guilford. I am a 14-year resident of Guilford, taxpayer. I'm employed at Nerds to Go, and I am for cannabis in Guilford. The main reason is what's on our sign as you enter the town. What does it say? It says an agricultural community since 1639. Cannabis is a plant, it's agriculture. First and foremost, I'm for allowing the North Guilford farmers that are struggling to cultivate marijuana. I lived in North Guilford, I've talked to them, and they are very much for that. Number two, I think that Guilford is a very inclusive town it's important to have a community. We do have great bars, we have great restaurants, but I'd like to see cannabis-related businesses as well. Not everyone enjoys those. Another point I wanted to make is Guilford is known for very high quality produce. We have Bishop's Market, we have Guilford Micro Greenery. I would love Guilford to be known as a place people could travel to and enjoy organic, craft, locally grown cannabis from Guilford, Connecticut. And then they can enjoy our gas stations, Dunkin' Donuts, cafes, and everything else. And it's important to do that. I think I spent the past 2 hours circling the town green here and doing my own survey without saying for or against, randomly, all ages. And there were for and against, and it was pretty much dead on to 65%, just like the town survey. A lot of the people that were against it or indifferent said over and over that they felt they were uneducated about the topic. It's important to educate people. We have a lot of good hemp companies in our surrounding towns, and I would love Guilford to have that as well. That's all that I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is anybody online that is wishing to speak? I don't
I'm not
see
seeing
any
any.
hands up at this point.
No.
So,
I would like to speak.
okay, for those in the, on Zoom, please use your electronic hand sign to put up. Thank you very much, Chad. Name and address for the record.
So my name is Chad Sagnella and I live at 58 Fair Street in Guilford, and I'm a licensed physician surgeon in the state of Connecticut. And I would say that if anything, I would likely be for cannabis in Guilford, but I am most concerned because I live currently a block from the green and I walk the green nearly every day. And 2 days ago was the first time that I had even seen or heard about this town meeting regarding cannabis, and it was buried in a Simply Guilford post. And I just think that overall the town needs to do a much better job at getting out public notices. Nobody reads the Guilford Courier. That's an archaic form of communication to be disseminated through. And I think that we need to do a lot. If looking cursory at what has been proposed as the town legislature and the survey results are, I just think we need to do a lot more investigation before we make a snap decision like this and prevent any kind of cannabis from coming to Guilford and not truly understanding what benefits it may have for the town, both financially, recreationally, travel-wise, etc. I just think that we need more time and we need to look at this further, and we haven't done due diligence yet, and that the town really needs to do a better job of getting out local issues to the public so that we can really have a voice. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Chad.
Thank you.
I think you had your hand up first. I'm gonna try to remember. Billy, you'd be next.
Camille Solbrig, 382 North River Street. And I basically concur with the first two speakers, especially about not getting information from the town. I don't know why that is. I read the Courier. So sometimes it's in there and sometimes it isn't. But I had a question. from what I read in the last courier, that you're also going to restrict people actually using cannabis. Is that correct?
Smoking.
town property.
On town property.
On town property. So I have an objection to that. I mean, I think it could be controlled, so, but to totally ban it, I mean, it's a legal substance. And I guess I also have, issues with the fact that you can't bring a bottle of wine to the green and have a picnic. And that's a legal substance as well. And of course, you can always, have rules of people who, imbibe too much, but that's basically my comment.
Thank you very much. Anybody online with their hand up? I don't see anyone. Bill?
Bill Dwyer, Donald Road. I've been here 35 years, a long time. I'm opposed to the proposed ordinance, although not completely. I think that it's past time for Guilford to get involved. The room we're sitting in, there's a dispensary as close as the nearest Stop and Shop. So by you preventing a dispensary from opening in Guilford, you're not accomplishing anything. And you're probably gonna be annoying a majority, at least 65% of your citizens. So I don't think it makes sense to do that. I think that the town needs to have control from the beginning of where a dispensary would go. The idea of cultivating in North Guilford is a great idea, but you need to have rules. Production, can be done. We have places like Soundview that are appropriate. Next to Calhoun School's not, And then as far as a cannabis cafe or something like that, I mean, that's something you can hold off on. You put it in there that they are not permitted at this point, but that you're certainly very interested in discussing with people who may have a desire to open something like that. But I mean, to me, the idea of a dispensary is, the horse is out of the barn. It's not worth talking about anymore. And there's a tax issue. I spoke, knowing this was coming up, to Jim Zioli, who's the first selectman in Orange. I know you know him, Matt. I don't know if anybody else does. He told me they're getting $30,000 a month from one store, which they anticipate being over $300,000 a year. The way I figure it, that's gonna put them in the top 10 taxpayers in the town, the first year they're here. That's not a bad thing. There's things that the town can do with that money, including drug education. But to throw it away, the people in Guilford are driving to Branford and buying it and paying the taxes that the town of Branford's getting. The fact that the dispensary is not here is not stopping anyone from buying it. The idea of using it in public, you don't want people hanging around on the sidewalk. But, and the bottle of wine on the green is a good point. I think that might need to be looked at as well. And it's controlled. We have a great police department. I think we can handle stuff like that. That's not part of the ordinance, but I think it's important to look at in the not too distant future. So basically, I'm opposed to the ordinance as presented.
Thank you, Bill. Tracy, anybody online with their hand up?
Yep, Sarah Williams. Hi there. Can you hear me
Hi,
okay?
Sarah. Hold on, yeah, let me just turn the volume up a little bit there. Okay, go ahead.
All right, is that better?
I think so. Hopefully it's not too loud in the room. Was it okay? Yeah, it's good.
Okay. I just first want to start off by saying thank you for having this meeting. I think there's been some changes in Guilford lately where more people would have liked to have had more input. So I think that this is a very important process and I appreciate it. I do support the ordinance as it is proposed, and there's a piece of this that I don't know that everyone is considering or is aware of, and that is the enforcement issue. We've got a lot of problems enforcing our zoning regulations. We have little rules here and there for things like home businesses and, a wink and a nod to individual landowners that they'll keep an eye on it. And it's a really hard thing to keep up with. And so the idea of monitoring, the town staff having the capacity to monitor this or the growth of this or the sale of this, it's hard for me to believe that we would do a good job at that. And so that's sort of why I feel like this right now, this is where we are. And I think it's a good move to have the ordinance the way it's presented.
Thank you, Sarah. In the room, sir, I think you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Eli Foyer. I reside at 1221 Great Hill Road in town here for over 35 years. This is my first time in such civic engagement, and it was an obstacle for me. Excuse me if I'm a little nervous. I have prepared some carefully considered remarks, which I did time out, and they are about a hair over 5 minutes. If nobody objects, I'd like to read them in total because I think it would throw me off to try to edit them on the fly. Nobody objects? Anybody?
Any objections right now?
No.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, selectmen and women. I have come to address the Board of Selectmen in strong opposition of the proposed cannabis ban currently under consideration. I believe the proposed ban is an overly broad, unnecessary, and regressive prohibition in clear defiance of the town residents' public support for allowing cannabis-related businesses and activities. It has been put forth for adoption in the town code, despite the awareness of those on the Board of Selectmen that a healthy majority of town residents are in favor of allowing retail cannabis sales. I became aware of this contradiction when I read the May 30th edition of the Guilford Courier, where First Selectman Hoy is quoted as saying, quote, "The state of Connecticut has made cannabis legal. The surveys we conducted and the polling we did suggest the community supports the sale and/or cultivation and the allowance for those forms of business to exist here in town. About 64% of residents favor the allowance of retail sales in other establishments." End quote. Selectman Hoy's understanding of the public sentiment on this issue comes from the study the town is self-commissioned, which, as he said, documents a significant majority of residents support the allowance of cannabis in our community and do not support the type of regulations and punitive enforcement measures currently under consideration. Guilford's proposed cannabis ban goes against the tide of broader public opinion, which has shifted away from the criminalization of cannabis, not just at the state level in many parts of this country, but also at the federal level, where pardons and a push to reschedule cannabis suggests increasing acknowledgement that prohibition is a failed policy. Yet those stewarding our town's government have suggested they will enact this ban, again in opposition to the preferences of the majority of Guilford residents surveyed, by using the town government's authority to regulate behavior, quote, deemed to be deleterious to public health. One could argue that the trend towards easing laws around the prohibition of cannabis is a tacit admission that the cost of prohibition and criminalizing cannabis has had a more deleterious impact on public health than accepting its regulated use. I have not seen where the town has demonstrated the dangers to public health that the proposed ban purports to protect us from. In what ways do our select men and women see the risk to public health posed by the legal adult use of cannabis to be different and greater than other substances condoned within the town, such as alcohol and tobacco? Guilford condones the sale of alcohol and tobacco throughout the town, substances which, I believe, have a documented and far greater adverse effect on public health than cannabis. Yet we leave it up to adults of legal purchasing age to determine for themselves the risks, if the risks are acceptable. Also, given that prohibition has never fully stopped the use of a banned substance, any ordinance or law that prevents the purchase of those substances through legal channels, which offer tested and regulated product, only encourages the illicit trade in these banned substances and subjects consumers to the greater risk associated with untested products purchased on the black market. What concerns me about this proposed ordinance is not just the rejection of a commercial cannabis trade within Guilford, but the attempt to reinstate a regressive prohibition on simply possessing cannabis as a legal product. I refer to Section 5 of the proposed ordinance, which makes clear the prohibition includes a penalty for carrying of an edible cannabis substance on any property owned or controlled by the town of Guilford. It would be a punishable violation of our town laws to simply possess an edible cannabis substance while traveling through our common spaces. This infraction does not seem to be reliant on public intoxication or the transfer of the cannabis product from one individual to another, but simply based on carrying or possession of the legal commodity in question. I believe this will have chilling repercussions, which I will attempt to address shortly. If such measures are necessary to protect the public health, in light of the great harm to public health posed by alcohol and tobacco, should individuals carrying a pack of cigarettes across the green be subject to a fine? If not, why would the town do so for an individual carrying an edible cannabis product? Situated on the green is a store that sells alcohol. Should someone who purchases alcohol from the store and carries their purchase across the green to their car be subject to a fine? If not, then this ordinance under consideration is inappropriately prejudicial in its focus on cannabis and calls into question the consistency with which town officials seek to regulate behaviors and substances involving potential health risks. Today, I spoke with two separate town officials who informed me that the smoking of tobacco and the simple possession of a sealed alcohol container are not currently prohibited on the town green. I'm not suggesting that they should be. Having learned from the town clerk's office that the majority of roads in the town are, quote, areas controlled by the town, does this suggest that an individual involved in a traffic stop for a non-cannabis related infraction, an inappropriate right turn on red light perhaps, could be subject to an additional infraction and penalties based on carrying cannabis products that have been legally purchased? I ask, does this ordinance promote an open and trusting relationship with our local law enforcement, or does it complicate it? One can imagine an individual carrying a cannabis edible but breaking no other law than this proposed ordinance, being discouraged from engaging with law enforcement should they have been witness to some other more serious violent motor vehicle or property crime. This ordinance moves buying, carrying, and using cannabis back in the direction of illicit use. This has been well demonstrated to increase social and health risks. I strongly encourage the board to not adopt this.
Thank you very much.
Here, here.
Let's go back to the Zoom call. Anybody electronically raised hands there or physical hands? I don't. Looks like it's resting against her face at this
Oh,
point.
she did that, and I don't know.
Is that her name, Colleen Otis? I can't.
Yes, yes.
Colleen Otis, were you looking to make a comment? Sir?
It's not.
It looked like she was. Yeah, it did. Well, there, she put her hand up.
We'll give her another opportunity. Don't worry, we'll give her another opportunity.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Duncan Markovich. I reside at 45 Bradley Avenue, Brantford. I wanted to thank the board for this opportunity for the public section. I come, I would say, against how this is written as of right now. And I'd like to introduce myself as a fellow Shoreline Chamber of Commerce member. So I'm the owner of Better Ways. We are a hemp and CBD store on Main Street in downtown Brantford. We opened in 2019. We have since won Best on the Shoreline for alternative health and wellness hemp and CBD stores every year since that category was created. Our focus has always been on education and transparency about the cannabis plant and the industry, safety, the protection of the youth, transparency in our test results, and the quality of our products on our shelves. I personally use cannabis daily for pain management and nerve damage, and I have built a successful local business that focuses on giving people cannabis products that don't get them high. So I wanted to speak very briefly tonight, also just as a barometer for what's going on. As some of your fellow townspeople have said, we didn't even know about this meeting. There's not enough information that gets shared. So on our side, I wanted to share right now, state of Connecticut has some of the most restrictive cannabis licensing laws in the country. We also have some of the highest allowable limits of mold and bacteria in our medical marijuana program. So to say that the companies that are raking in big money for their town with tax revenue is a disservice to the actual use of this plant, its overall purpose, how it's honored within its community, but more importantly, the companies and individuals that are allowed and unchecked, sort of monopoly in this state. And so townspeople or officials see the big dollar signs or the concerns. I'm equally concerned for the youth. I think cannabis education should start in middle school and high school about the dangers, just like alcohol. I also think the town has its capacity to allow and follow the Connecticut Clean Air Act. Cannabis is allowed to be consumed in public wherever cigarettes are allowed. I do not agree with cigarettes, and I certainly do not agree with alcohol. I think both should be Schedule 1, but that's a different conversation. More importantly, here in the town of Guilford, a colleague and a friend, someone I've supported since he started, his name's Pete Onofrio. He owns Blue Star Hemp in North Guilford. Has been a huge part of the town with his business, and as well as with the town's farmers market. And as of recently, he has been barred from the very farmers market he's participated in year after year. So I want there to be, my hope is that there is an earnest appreciation for what is occurring versus what's being seen, and that there is a lot of money being involved, especially as now federally this plant is being reclassified as Schedule 3. Soon you're gonna have cannabis in your CVS. So this fear that, what do we do and how do we protect it? You should embrace it. There's a lot of opportunity here. And there's, outside of THC and CBD, there's industrial hemp. There are patents to be made. There are pioneers and innovators in our youth. I have a lot more evidence of this, but I just wanted to speak and say, I hope you guys look towards your neighboring towns. If you want to talk to Harry Smith or myself or First Selectman Cosgrove, we have that unique balance of, we have Rise Dispensary, which is a medical hybrid recreational dispensary now, and then my CBD store on Main Street. So they are the big box, multi-state operator, corporate cannabis. We're gonna just have the whole rollout. And then you have local, small business operators like myself and others who wanna protect what this plant can do. This plant changes lives. I've seen it happen. I've helped people get off all sorts of pharmaceuticals. I think Guilford has a significant responsibility to the Connecticut shoreline to pick up the reins and grow some great cannabis and right the wrongs of what's going on. So I'll leave it to it.
Thank you very much. Just a quick footnote to Eli's comments on that quote in the paper. Either I misspoke, which is often the case, or I was misquoted, which is occasionally the case. The percentage was 74%, not 64%. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
If I can just, I thank you for that clarification and encourage all to get the source data. It's on the town website. I looked at it directly and I didn't mean to misquote.
No, not you. I said I may have misspoke, or the reporter misquoted, so.
Those are good numbers.
Those have happened in the past, believe me. Anybody online wishing to speak?
Christine Dacco.
Who's that?
Hi, Christine Dacco.
Hi,
This is Christine
Christine.
Dacco. I'm at 23 Mill Road in Guilford. I wasn't planning to speak tonight at all, but I hear that there are a lot of people speaking out against the ordinance. I just wanted to speak out in favor of it. Like I said, I don't have prepared remarks, but I do think it's a youth friendly ordinance and I'm in favor of it. I also have a question. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask a question at this point, but I was wondering what the participation rate of the survey that you're referring to was.
It was over, it was about 1,100 people in town.
1,100 out of our, like, what, 23?
Which is considered a statistically valid sample survey in survey technology.
That's right.
Like 5%? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Most political surveys are done at less than 1%.
Okay.
Well, that probably shows why they're so accurate lately. But.
Well, no, I think that there are, people who are interested in this issue, who are passionate about this issue for various reasons are going to have really jumped on that survey. But I think that there are others that may not have been paying as close attention to it due to because it was more of a personal issue, not necessarily a business issue. But I just wanted to lend a voice on the other side in favor of the ordinance. I'm really glad that it's on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lou Rinaldi, 201 Water Street, Guilford resident, father of three. I work at Yale University. I hold an MBA from Albertus Magnus College, professional certificate in data science from UC Berkeley. Thank you for pointing out that that is a statistically significant sample size. I have been a registered medical patient since 2019. In 2021, I exposed collusion between one of the state's two cannabis testing labs and the regulator, the Department of Consumer Protection. The result of that effort led to the lab closing permanently after the corruption was exposed. DCP has yet to face any accountability for crimes against medical patients like myself and others in this room. More recently, I've worked directly with Connecticut House Majority Leader Jason Rojas to create an Office of the Cannabis Ombudsman for the state of Connecticut, which was signed into law by Ned Lamont last year. And our new state ombudsperson, Erin Gorman Kirk, began her work in the job last week. So quite a bit going on, a lot of moving parts, as others have said in the room. Part of my remarks tonight had to do with the survey, but I find myself a little bit turned around because I was apparently under the incorrect impression that there was an attempt being made to say that what I thought was a 2/3 majority now sounds like a 75% majority had been weighted in favor of opposition to cannabis, but I appear to be misinformed on that fact. So I'm not sure what the weighting reference was about, but it seems like it doesn't matter at this point because you've acknowledged that the vast majority have expressed favorable opinions here. I think it's also important to point out that we're not just talking about stores that sell cannabis here. We're talking about, I believe our first selectman mentioned 11 different license types, including delivery services, including packaging, manufacturing, any number of ancillary businesses that are not necessarily in the business of transacting in cannabis products directly. I do think that there's tremendous potential for tax revenue for the town of Guilford, and I don't necessarily think that that revenue has to come directly from retail. I also want to point out an observation on the ordinance that I saw that medical would be allowed. The challenge that I see with medical is that you've got the same startup costs, same capital, same real estate challenges as adult use, but you're also looking at a captive customer base of 40,000 and shrinking on a weekly basis. Since adult use came online in Connecticut, the medical program has been cratering, and we hear nothing from the Board of Physicians that's involved with the program. The state doesn't seem to care. So that's why I'm glad that we now have an ombudsperson who's in a position to fight for the interests of patients and give them a voice in their own program. I would encourage everyone in this room to keep an open mind about the licensure of businesses within Guilford. It does not necessarily have to be retail. We're talking about a wide variety of services here. And we've heard at the previous two, I believe there were two previous hearings from folks who are eager and willing and ready to pay taxes in the town and would love to be opening up their businesses here. So I appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to come and speak and to listen. And thank you so much for your time.
All right, let's go back to Zoom. Anyone on remote Zoom call wishing to speak? Do we see any? I don't see any hands raised. Tracy, anything?
Debbie.
Debbie? Debbie, you might be muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I couldn't do it. Sorry.
A real hand is as good as a virtual hand.
Thank you. I guess I'm happy with our ordinance at this point, and I really would like to find out a lot more. There were other people who brought up many different views previous to my conversation. I do believe it is a follow the money, talking about 30,000 with taxes. And I do feel that we're always talking about adults and adult use, and I don't have a problem with adult use. But when we're talking about marijuana, there up to the age of 25, the brain is still developing. So I guess that's what I'm really concerned about. And I do feel that it's not such a big deal to go to Brantford to get your weed. We've had Madison and Clinton written in permanent ordinances for the health of their community. So I'd like to start out. Our town needs to prioritize the health of our community members vulnerable to cannabis use disorders due to their age, under 25, anxiety and attention deficit disorder. Our communities already face risks from alcohol, nicotine, vaping, and access to prescription and counterfeit drugs. We recognize the need for education and the ability to test driver impairment after marijuana use. That's not available to us. I mean, you drink, you drive, they can test you. You smoke, you drive, you get into an accident, you hit someone, they have no idea. Which puts every other vehicular passenger and pedestrian at increased risk from consumers who would purchase marijuana at a town of Guilford retail or consumption site, use it and drive. The life, health, and safety of our Guilford residents are worth more than the promised tax revenue from marijuana sales. Our own Guilford Day, which, you know, we had the signs years ago. It's worth it. And everybody wondered what is it? It's worth it. Our children, our young adults are worth it. Has very informative websites with 3 very important videos every Guilford resident should watch. These videos explain through facts the truth about marijuana and the effects on our community. There's a Yale doctor, Professor Dr. D'Souza, and he has a 45-minute video on there, and I would suggest that people do watch that. And I think it's sort of very contradictory that we now have a meth clinic coming to our town, and yet on the other hand, we're promoting the use of marijuana. And as I said, it's legal, adults could buy it, go out of town. I think it would be very hard for our town with all of the information the previous people pointed out to manage this and to regulate it because of all the 11 categories and different licenses involved. I think things like this get out of control. We're worried about our children and their mental health, and we're bringing this in that causes psychosis and anxiety. It's such a contradiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Hi, my name is Deborah O'Neill and I live off of Moose Hill in Guilford. I initially completely agreed with the ordinance. If it could be parsed out that, I know this gentleman mentioned the farmers in North Guilford, but I don't see how you can do that. Wouldn't that be considered discriminatory? Because wouldn't people apply for licenses within whatever the zoning or the parameters that the town set? And you can't say, oh, just people in Guilford apply, we'll give you the licenses. I mean, am I correct in that or not?
No, it would be a classic property rights
Right, so
issue.
it doesn't matter whether the North Guilford farmers are interested, you wouldn't be able to just give it to them.
There is no
Farm-
official North Guilford.
Well, somebody
It's
mentioned
the
agriculture.
It's a long
Just farmer in North.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
once again, you cannot just give it to citizens of Guilford.
Right, it's a
Okay.
property, it's a
So
property.
Anybody
it
can buy
would
that
be-
land.
Right, for anybody.
I mean, he's licensed with the state.
I also don't understand about the tax revenue. I thought that Connecticut was a state that did not rebate back the sales tax to the
It's
towns.
in the legislation, 3% goes back to the individual municipalities.
Actually, no, the
20%.
way I read the statute, it just says the 3%, but it doesn't say it goes back to the municipality that generated the
It does go
3%.
back to the
It does
municipalities.
now say that?
It does.
Okay. Well, I still, also, I agree with what some other people said about finding out about these important hearings. I just sort of glanced on it through the patch or something. I had no idea you were having this hearing today. And as far as the survey, I know that you said it was statistically significant, but I think there's 24,000 people that live in Guilford, or 21,000.
Right, and
Around that.
it was weighted by age, so if you want to.
Well, I did the survey, and you had to pick specific responses. Not, you couldn't change anything, and if you didn't pick one of the specific responses, you could not go on to the next question. And I think some people did complain about that. It didn't really.
That's the first complaint of that type that I have heard.
Okay, well, that's when I took it. So that's about it. I would prefer to have the blanket ordinance, and then we can have more meetings and maybe change it. But I don't want to open it up to the whole panoply of, businesses you could have, and then you won't be able to pull back. So that's what I.
Thank you, Deborah. Anyone else on Zoom that wishes to speak?
I would like to speak. Can I speak?
And your name is?
My name is Lindsay Smith.
And your address?
And I'm a resident. 139. I'm sorry. I'm having trouble. I am not part of Guilford, but I don't live in Guilford, but my children and my family are always doing activities and scouting in Guilford. So we are constantly in Guilford. So I would just like to say, as a parent and as a person that is constantly in Guilford, that again, this plant is being demonized. And we've seen what has happened in prohibition with alcohol in the past, and demonizing a plant or anything causes more trouble. We need to educate people. This is not just about THC. There are other cannabinoids that can help people in their health, in their mental health. And, when did you see people, like we see car accidents with the mothers against drunk drivers? You don't see this type of behavior with cannabis. It is not, I think that alcohol is worse in its ways. So again, I think that we just need to really open up the conversation of, it is not just THC that we are talking about. We are talking about hemp. We are talking about other health related properties that this plant has, and it has been demonized for too long. And I hope that with education for the children as well, I agree, I'm a parent too. I would not want my children as well participating in alcohol or in pot until they're in their 20s, but that starts with education. And once we start saying no to people, we're going to have more of a problem. So I'm glad to have this conversation. I'm glad that the board is opening, and I hope that we can move forward with really a true education of this plant and not just demonize it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. In the room.
Dylan Douglas from 101 Murray Lane. I'm a resident of Guilford for over 10 years now. Have 2 children here in the Guilford School District, and I was going to come up and basically tout we should allow it in our town because it's over in Branford. What does it matter? That sort of thing. But what the last speaker actually just mentioned, and previous speaker about Guilford Day, demonizing it to our children. I remember my oldest coming home from Calvin Leet and basically telling me about what he learned from Guilford Day he was under the impression a single drink will send him into the gutter and basically destroy his life with a massive downfall of everything, rather than an education of what moderation is, what control is, what decision-making is. And I think if we try to demonize it, marijuana that is, it's just going to get this all or nothing effect from our children. And so his mother and I had to explain to him, no, if someone has a singular drink, their life does not end up being destroyed. So that's what the last speaker just triggered in my head. And I really didn't like seeing that effect with my child, and I don't want that to be the lesson that our children are learning about marijuana. Moving back to what I was originally going to say was, yes, it is available in Brantford, and like some of the earlier speakers were saying, it is there, and yes, you can just go over there and get it. But we have to also think of, what about the Guilford residents that don't have easy means to go over to Brantford or over to another town that has a dispensary? I'm looking at it from that standpoint. Yes, we in this room were able to get here and we're able to get to this meeting and probably could get to Brantford quite easily. But that is not the case with all Guilford residents. And I'd like that to be a point that we think about. Thank you, John.
Let's go back online first before anyone online wishing to speak, raise your hand electronically or wave. All right, hearing none, I think you're next. Yeah, please come on.
Diana Albright, and I live on Beach Road. And I want you to go to the CDC website, and I would like you to read about what happens to a baby in utero when its mother is taking cannabis. I also would like you to read about young children and what it does to their young brains. And this goes all the way up to teens. And that's all that I ask you. Just look at it and you might change your mind, some of you who are in favor of this. Our kids will get their hands on it. Young kids will, from their older siblings or some friend. And this is my issue as a mom. So I thank you.
Going back online again. Anyone? Anything, Tracy? No? In the room?
Nope.
In the room? In the back?
Get my phone to turn on.
There you go. Take your
Kathy
time.
Fowler, 77
It's not a race.
Road. Sorry. Easier for me to read it. Okay, Connecticut voters legalize
Name
marijuana.
and address for the record.
Oh, 77 Beach Road.
Name first.
Kathy Fowler said that. Legalized marijuana over 2 years ago. Town polls show that residents are in favor of its dispensary in Guilford by 74%, rather than 64, which I wrote. Since then, the Board of Selectmen have dragged their feet on holding any hearings and have now focused on drafting an ordinance that would ban cannabis establishments of any type from operating in our town. The ordinance would not apply to medical cannabis dispensaries. I don't understand why. The only difference in the two establishments is that you show up with a doctor's note and don't pay taxes. The facilities are identical. They are the same products and provide the same services in the same building. However, recreational marijuana is taxed on a 3-tier system, and 3% of the tax goes directly to the town that the dispensaries are located in. The Brantford dispensary is a great example of how it works. If you go sit in the parking lot for a while, you will see people peacefully coming and going, and you will see a very diversified age group, people from all walks of life. There are no problems, and Brantford is raking in the money. Why would we not want this in our town? I think the first selectman should focus on what the voters want. Thank you for your time.
On the Zoom call, anyone? Seeing anybody in the room want to come up? Just one more time on Zoom. In the room. Barbara?
Hi, Barbara Hargraves, and I'm at 284 Landon's Way. I'm not really here. I'll be honest, I'm rather indifferent on this whole thing. But my concern kind of ties into what Sarah said online, and also, I mean, I think Deb and Christine brought this up as well, in terms of zoning and planning and zoning regulations. Is there a way that the town of Guilford would be able to limit the number of dispensaries or set up any sort of regulations? Because I would not be in favor of having dispensaries all over the place. I mean, I don't want liquor stores all over the place either. And I would be in favor of the ban until we could kind of set more clear regulations up, because if we just open it up and then you can, it seems like once we allow all of that to go through, everything that was in the proposed ban, it's very difficult to dial it back. So I know that you guys have been talking about this for a long time, because I've seen the notices, I've seen on the town, and just on an aside, for people who are saying they don't see anything, the town website is like an incredible source of information. I go there all the time. There's so much information there, and like you can pull up, just so you know, you can pull up the meeting minutes from the Board of Selectmen meeting. Those are the most valuable in my mind, just because they kind of touch on everything in town. So you can see kind of what's going on. And I read the Courier, so I'm glad this stuff is in there. But before we kind of say, yeah, let's do this, I would rather see like, what could we do in terms of regulations and planning, because I would hate to just not be able to make changes after the fact. So I would be in support of the ban until we can get more clarity on that issue. And that's it. Thanks.
Just a quick comment to that. This board has had discussions in the public arena about limiting, if we were to allow it, to limiting to a certain number of establishments. I think we've talked about no more than 2 of any particular type, excuse me. No more than 2 of any particular type. We have not put together a specific ordinance that details that. We have a couple of straw men that have been passed around amongst ourselves by town attorney Pete Barrett. But we hadn't actually arrived at the point where we said, we think the community will say yes, and this is how we think the community will accept it. So I think coming out of another public discussion, that we can feel somewhat emboldened to put something formal together that suggests if we were to allow it, and by the way, that would only be by agreement of the 5 of us, and it may not be unanimous in terms of how we do that. But that is what is contemplated if we were to extend the ban, the current moratorium. So anyone else wishing to comment? I want to do this so fairness before we allow folks to come up a second time.
So Matt, let me just ask you to clarify that point a little bit. Let's just say this proposal, which you say, advance the discussion and have a meeting.
Absolutely.
It gets passed. Does that mean that we can't go back a year from now and revisit it? And
We could go back a month from now. So it could go back a month.
I thought when we talked about this earlier that the state had some rules as to how big a town was, depending on how many establishments or various ways you could go with it. That's not the case.
Those are expiring though, or have expired, if I'm not mistaken.
Because when you said there's 11 different ways to go potentially, I didn't think that we could even go 11 different
No,
ways.
there's 11 different types of business operations.
But I thought there was a limit for town population.
There originally was.
But that has moved.
Okay, but no longer have this.
I believe it was 1 The suggestion was one dispensary for every 25,000 people. Branford's almost at 50, so that was a conversation. That was.
But that limitation has since passed.
But having that guardrail, at the end of the day, the municipality has the highest power, and that's why.
And that's the authority that we have, so.
It's great.
Is there a rule on liquor stores? Like how many?
Yeah, the state regulates.
Okay. Okay.
They decided to pass this one down to us, because they didn't want to get there. So on this one, they regulate where, how many licenses are now closed. Anyway, I want to get back to,
The liquor stores.
anybody else online, wanting to make a comment? All right, I had indicated that we allow folks to come back up a second time if they wanted to, but please refrain from the counterpoint, and arguing with anything anybody else has said. Yeah, I don't know if you can do that, you're welcome to come back.
May I address the meeting again briefly here? Eli Foyer, 1221 Great Hill Road. Not to refute anybody's point, but just based on my own personal experience, having familiarized myself with the survey conducted by the town, which I'll take a brief tangent to say, while I value each of your testimony and think anecdotal evidence is great, I applaud the town for employing a company that both had and explained its methodology in presenting data that, perhaps more accurately reflects the broad opinions of this town versus, just people willing to leave their home on a Monday night. I saw, looking at the survey online, that there were several open-ended questions, and in fact, there's a spreadsheet online that details people's, in their own words, answers to some of those questions. And also, before finishing again and taking up more of your time, I'd like to point out that the center of the debate this evening, it seems to be around retail sales, and there are other components to this bill. Nobody has refuted my reading of this bill that we are attempting to create civil penalties for mere possession on town property or town-owned or controlled properties. The way I read that, if you get into a interaction with law enforcement walking down the street holding an edible, you may be subject to penalties, and that just doesn't seem right to me. So thank you again for listening to my thoughts, and
Good for me to make a comment to the 11 types of businesses, and my father had a saying, which he reminded me of occasionally: you can't be a little bit pregnant. So how do you allow retail sales but don't allow cultivation or distribution or something else? It's somewhat hypocritical, I believe, and that's one man's opinion. I don't know whether my fellow board members share the same thing, but clearly what we have contemplated and articulated is putting some limitations around any of these types of businesses if we're going to do something. So again, come on back up.
So just a few comments, just more for everyone's edification. So prior to my opening of my business, I was an educator, camp counselor, sailing instructor. The protection of the youth is very near and dear to me. And that really always goes back to education. So I have, since inception, especially with COVID, have successfully helped many children and parents and families with cannabis products that don't contain THC. So again, there are many different ingredients to this puzzle. And then more so, the potential ban on these 11 business licenses will not govern the existing liquor operators who are now getting allowed to backdoor cannabis beverage sales without licensing. So regardless of whether there's a decision to restrict the actual 11 types of businesses at your points of sale for liquor, there will still be retail sales of cannabis products.
That's true. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Bill?
Just briefly, I think it's time to move forward with a start. I think agriculture not necessarily restricted to North Guilford, but to anybody with agricultural land that's interested. I think production in an appropriate location. I don't think anybody's looking to bring that in, but I wouldn't be opposed to that. And you probably want to look at one dispensary. If you want to open a second one 2 years down the road, you can address it, but you start with one. The other 8 licenses, I would hold off until you find out what people are looking to do. You can move quickly. If someone comes in with whatever the other licenses are and comes to the board and says, I'd like to bring this business to town, you find out what they want to do, and then you make a decision. You can have another meeting like this. You guys can make a decision. I trust you. You know, but I think it's time to start. And I think those 3 things are the appropriate things to start with. The others are, you know, nobody has information on the other stuff, except him. And if he wants to open a store in Guilford, he can certainly come to the board and tell you why. And I wouldn't be opposed to it. But I think that's probably where you want to start. And, you know, there's always going to be people that are going to run around saying the sky is falling. And that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. That's what makes America great, not a red hat.
Okay.
And, you know, just, we got to get dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
I just want to make a couple of comments. First of which is there's tremendous sentiment for allowing North Guilford farmers to participate. The reality is they would not be able to compete in the market with one growing season. The production facilities, the growth facilities are warehouses. They are big warehouses. Current zoning code would not allow anyone to put even a micro cultivator versus the macro cultivator, which is what, 20,000 square feet per. Even those facilities would not be allowed in our current zoning code on most of the farms in Guilford.
Because they're too small or too big?
No, they wouldn't be allowed.
Structures.
It's commercial enterprise.
We need more smaller operations.
Thank you for your input. One of the things that I want to talk to about, Bill, incrementalism is a classic form of governmental movement. Always has been. We rarely go from here to here. We sort of nudge our way along, right? And again, I'm not sure this is one of those areas we're going to be able to do that, because that then puts this board in the middle of zoning decisions, which I think state statute says we're not supposed to do. So we may take us a little while longer, or we need to put a straw man out there that says this could be changed at any time. So I think we need to consider each one of those 11 businesses and put some kind of definition around what we anticipate to be there. Because the last thing you want is a bunch of elected officials doing zoning. That is the purview of planning and zoning, and it's entrusted to them by state statutes. So anyway, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox at this point. Any other members want to say anything? Anybody else want to make a further comment? Come on up, please.
Valerie Ferrucci, 1595 Little Meadow Road. I'm also somewhat indifferent. I share a lot of points of views on both sides that everyone spoke about tonight. But something that I had done was I spoke to a friend who I've never been inside of a dispensary. I have a friend who uses marijuana medically. She has a tremendous amount of health issues. And I was asking her about what a dispensary is like. You know, most of us have probably been in a liquor store, understand what it's like. And I don't even believe you can walk in without identification. I don't believe that you can even touch anything. It's all behind lock and key, and it's extremely safe. So I share a lot of points of view about children having access. I don't think that that's the issue with this, with the dispensary. It's just something that I wanted to share that people may not be aware of, and maybe people should go to a dispensary themselves and just see that perspective. So.
Thank you, Valerie. Last year, Representative Maura Rader and I actually went to the dispensary in Branford to see what the facility actually looked like. And it's easier to get into some federal buildings than it is to get into the dispensary. Sir, come on back.
Dylan Douglas again.
Thank you, Dylan.
I wasn't going to speak a second time, but to address the dispensary and how you said, I do go to Rise Dispensary over in Branford, and I do agree that it is easier to get into some federal buildings than to get into Rise Dispensary. Basically, you have to get past a guard on the outside of the building, show them your ID. They let you in. You basically go into an airlock. You're verified by a person on the inside, who then lets you into the actual dispensary. You make your selections via kiosk. There is no product located there. You enter that in, you wait in line, you get to the front of the line. You are asked to present your ID once again. They go in the back through locked doors. Again, there is no product. So say I was the cashier, there is nothing here. I have to then go in the back through a security door, get your order, bring it back, verify it's you, present it to you. You are then asked to leave the store through a different door than you entered. You are not allowed to use any product within the store. It's basically get in, get your stuff, get out. CVS, it's easier to get behind their counter, or Walgreens to get to what's there. I also went to a dispensary over in Old Saybrook. Not as beautifully white walls and sterile. They actually made it a little homier looking, but it is basically the same procedure. You have to get through several security doors to get inside. There is no product for you to grab and run. And then you are immediately asked to leave. In fact, the Old Saybrook one, you cannot even make your order in the store. You have to make it online before you even arrive to the store.
Thank you, Dylan. Just a quick update to the Old Saybrook store. Over the last several days, I've had some conversations with first selectmen and communities that have the dispensaries, and Old Saybrook is changing that requirement. They will now allow walk-in retail, not order ahead of time. Anyone else? Okay.
There's someone online that wants to speak about Razel Fuhr.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Richard Foyer, homeowner at 1221 Great Hill Road, residing primarily in Branford now. So I've experience of both towns. I've been a physician, a psychiatrist for many decades, and a large part of my practice over the years has slowly, unfortunately, become involved in the treatment of substance abuse. So I'm pretty aware, and I don't treat children or adolescents. I'm treating adults, some young adults, but primarily adults from 30 years on. And you know, the use of marijuana, there's no surprise fact that it's used quite regularly. It's used very much like people use alcohol in terms of the number of people using it and so on and so forth. One of the problems in recent years, and most my practice focused on opiate addiction and various interventions to prevent overdose and so on. And I think those in my field are aware of the fact that a safe, controlled access to cannabis is crucial in preventing, tragic consequences in young adults. When before the legalization, the age of fentanyl has been here for well over a decade now. And it didn't take long for people selling things to realize they could lace marijuana, cannabis, with fentanyl, and that people would really like it. Unfortunately, anyone who is opiate naive who used that kind of product was at significant risk of overdose or fatal overdose. The availability of legal and tested and pure THC now is life-saving in the sense that the people who are going to use cannabis are going to use it anyway. But if they use it from a source that is not a legitimate source, there is the risk of it being tainted with other things, whether it's as serious as fentanyl or something else. Some overdoses in New Haven a few years ago were related to synthetics, actually quite dangerous cannabis synthetics. So I think even from a purely, and again, I'm speaking about this from a health perspective, not from a commercial perspective. When you pass ordinances that create a notion in people's heads that, cannabis is something that's not acceptable. You shouldn't have it in your pocket if you're walking on, if you're in a public space, this and that. You're pushing people back towards a very dark area of consumption. And I think that, it's quite tragic when a young person who is not an opiate addicted person, who may only use cannabis or may use cannabis and cocaine, ends up with an opiate overdose because of, those substances being tainted. So I think it's, from a health perspective, it's really not a great idea to propose ordinances that make it, yes, anyone who wants it can, any adult, a young adult who wants it can go over to Branford. But you're creating a kind of image. You're running counter to what is being sought in most communities now, which is a more legitimate and safer and acceptable use of cannabis so that it carries less health risks, less medical risks than it would, left in its wild form. And so I just want to, emphasize this because it's not just about taxes coming in. If it were that, I would never speak in favor of it. That's not how our town, that's not how Guilford should be making its decisions on the basis of revenue. It should be making its decisions in terms of the welfare of its citizens. And I think that this type of ordinance creates an environment that works against the welfare of its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I just want to talk, it came up a couple of times, this revenue component. That has never been a driving factor in any of the conversations this board has had related to it. It just has never entered our mind. Because if you talk about Orange at 360,000, you talk about Old Saybrook doing about 10,000 a month, like 360 a year in Orange and 10,000 a month in Old Saybrook. We have a budget of $118 million. Doesn't make a difference. Does not make a difference. And I can say I think I can speak for most everyone up here. That's not a motivator one way or the other. So I want to make sure that's anyone else wishing to? Yep.
Just wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
The 3%, can you use that for
There-
anything the town wants?
No,
or
no,
it's
there
only-
are five or
Okay,
six
so it's
categories
still
that actually.
those- yeah, I saw that. Okay, so it can only be used on that which,
Right.
It's a great question.
Right, it is, and similar to what we have done with
but how would you get it? It's all cash business too.
the states, it's the state's taxing it.
State tax, okay.
The state has legalized it.
How do you get it? All right.
Anyway, no.
Yeah, but you know, that's about the three, because I saw that it was only certain, like 5 things you could use it on. That was
There are
specific.
5 or 6 categories.
All right, thank you.
Now, what I wanted to mention was if we were to legalize any of these businesses and we were to receive tax revenue, it would be my suggestion that we immediately run a funnel over to Youth and Family Services for addiction and prevention program. Not unlike what we have already done with the opioid settlement money that the town has gotten, and I believe it's $170,000 or $176,000 over the past few years. That money goes directly to Youth and Family Services for programs that I have heard people talk about us not investing in, but we have already made some investments. And quite honestly, at the Youth and Family Services level, they're not talking about opioid stuff. Predominantly, they're talking about drugs and alcohol. So anyway, I think that would be a consideration that this board would make if in fact we did go that way. So that's the obvious stuff. That's the easy stuff. Anyone else? Deb? Are you still muted, Deb? We can't hear you.
Okay.
Deb?
Yeah,
Here you- we
yeah, I
got you
know.
now.
Well, I couldn't, the mute was in the right corner and I couldn't get to it. So I do have a question that, it concerns me. Driving while impaired by any substance, including cannabis, is dangerous and illegal. Cannabis negatively affects several skills required for safe driving, such as reaction time, coordination, and concentration. So how would our police department or any police department, how with, it being recreational and more available? I mean, there's some people that are extremely responsible and you won't ever have to worry about that. But how do you test for that? I mean, we can test for alcohol, and even drugs. How are we going to test for that?
That's a problem that exists today where it is not legal to purchase it in Guilford. The police department, I've had conversations with them. They, like police departments across the state, are hoping against hope that the technology develops some kind of effective testing for marijuana. Now, you can test for a lot of other substances in people's bodies and determine that they're on opiates.
Okay, so I do have another question that goes along with that.
What's that?
I know of an accident that was in Guilford, and it was a while ago. It was about 5 years ago. And the person actually had to be given Narcan. The person was brought to the hospital, the emergency room in Guilford. They said it was invasive to take his blood.
Deb, I'm not going to comment on a legal
No.
case.
What I'm saying
That's-
to you is
that-
that these are the issues. So how do we work with these issues?
How is that relevant?
Yeah.
Those are issues that, hold it.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was, what I'm saying is it's a similar situation.
But Deb, it is a issue that exists today. Whatever
Right.
legal issues about privacy at the hospital, those are
Right.
not of our consideration or our concern. Those are to be taken up with either the institution and or law enforcement. So that is not a problem we're either gonna solve or eradicate as a result of making a decision on this particular issue.
Okay, because the police department was involved, but okay.
Matt, there's already,
No, we're not taking comments directly from the floor.
there's already testing for marijuana. All the town employees who hold commercial driver's licenses, I used to be one, is subject to random drug testing. The guy comes in, he hands you a bottle, you pee in it, and they test it. And if you're dirty, you get one shot at rehab and you lose your job. Period. There's no arguing about it. So the police have ways to test. The biggest problem that they have is that marijuana stays in your system for an extended period of time. So you may have used it today and you'll test dirty a week from now. All right? It's, the testing is there. It's not perfect, but, you know, it's not the town's concern about testing for being intoxicated because we have package stores in town. So it's not really the town's concern about testing for marijuana if you have a dispensary in town. It's either all or nothing.
All right, anyone else? All right, seeing none, I want to thank everyone, first and foremost for the way this meeting went. Civility did rule the day, and for that, I thank you. I think I can speak for some, I can speak for myself, but this conversation was informative and brought a couple of new perspectives to light that I hadn't contemplated. We're not going to be making a decision on that, on anything tonight. But I want to thank you for your reasoned input and your passion on this issue. So, anyone else want to say anything?
Yeah, the comment was made about communication by a number of people this evening, and I think that's very real and very important. We've had public hearings before on this. As a matter of fact, we had 2 scheduled, and a lack of participation, we canceled the second. And I think there's enough questions and thought process to Matt's point. I mean, whether it be the statistics that we've had in our record for a while now, and whether or not regular polling, it is what it is. But I think an outright ban at this point would be a struggle for me to justify, but I do think that there are controls that are going to be necessary, and zoning is one direction. I think, you hit it on the head. We shouldn't operate, take over zoning. I don't think we can legally take over zoning's responsibilities, but we can give them direction. Okay? And I think, we got to tonight because we were putting in the moratoriums, and we all agreed that, we can't keep having these moratoriums. We have to give the public something to react to. Because our first set of public hearings didn't bring out representative, people. It didn't bring out what we needed. Okay, so that's why we put forward something for tonight. Okay, I think through the communication improvements, if we get something more specific, outlining parts of the 11 or parts of the entire ordinance or licensing, I think would be a step further down the pike, so we can have some specifics for the public to react to. I think having legal counsel, whether weigh in on it or at the next public hearing, I think if we put something together and have another meeting and somehow improve the communication, we've heard this communication issue so many times and so many subjects. We can only tell people so many different ways, but I think we had a better turnout tonight than we had at the first meeting. I think if we, respond to some of the questions and ideas that showed up tonight and put something more specific, where we outline, a proposal. As simple as that would be a proposal. I think that would be productive in moving this along, because we do have to move it along at this point.
I'd like to speak to the communication, and Barbara, I appreciate your comments because, and there was another person here who said, nobody reads the paper. I think a lot of people don't read the paper, and I have to say, this meeting was headlined in the paper last Thursday, headlined on the first page in large type. But even if you didn't read that, then a lot of people are using their devices to get everything they need in life. So then you've got the town website. So I think we're doing two things. I'm not saying we can't do a better job, but I think we can satisfy people who don't want to read papers anymore and want to get their information through their phones or, technological devices, or if people are reading the paper, like I am too, we can do that. So I'm, before, when 2000 came over, we only got our information through the newspaper or perhaps banners. I mean, that was it. And people still came out to vote and came out to complain. Possibly, you can all have to compliment if you want. So, I will try, and believe me, we think about the communication aspect a lot. So, anyway, that was my 2 cents.
Can I just say?
Well done.
Thank you, Luke.
I have a couple comments. I think I'm gonna hit both sides of the spectrum here a little bit. Really, the outside edges of the bell curve, I think, what I'm hearing and what I'm starting to gather. So I'll start with the prohibition side of the argument, which I get it. This is a scary thing. Most of us in this room have sort of existed in a universe where this has been a prohibited product, and that's sort of the reflexive position. But my feeling is you can't legislate for every rule breaker. You cannot solve what the 3 or 5% on the outside edge of a norm that is established by a community are going to do. It's not saying you ignore it, but they go into a different response position. So that's sort of it's a bad idea. Let's not do it, because some people are going to do terrible things. The flip side of that is my view of something that is a privilege and is a mind-affecting product. People should not be walking down the streets smoking joints. And is that going to happen here in Guilford? No, but go to New Orleans and see what that's like. Go to Brooklyn and see what that's like. There are places where people get casual and presumptive of their personal rights and disregard the rights and responsibilities of everybody else in the community. So my feeling is the people that should have absolutely the most interest in self-regulating and educating, which you've heard a number of times tonight, are the people that are in favor of this. And if everyone wants to be disciplined and use a product in a way that's not disruptive and disregarding other people's interest in not participating in this, that would go a long way, I think, to encouraging me to be more inclined, as a person who's going to make this tough decision, to be more inclined to be in favor of it if I see disciplined behavior of people that are going to be using this stuff. And I have one last point, sorry. It goes to the comment about the, getting sort of stuck with an edible in your pocket, right? And I get it. That's kind of again, sort of falls into the unlikely small percentage, but it could happen, and you're not sort of doing anything wrong. But the more likely scenarios, people would have an edible. They'd say, well, who's this going to bother? I'm going to pop one of these things, and it's going to happen. So it falls into that second sort of self-regulating thing. I'm a proponent, I'll just say it, of regulating what happens on town property to respect the entire slice of the community. Do what you want on your time with your friends, where, in your, space. For us here, I think it's a good idea. Do I think people should get arrested for one residual gummy? No, I don't think that should be happening or fined. But the answer to that is be disciplined. So anyway, there's my soapbox, to use Matt's term.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so where do we go from here? I mean, the moratorium is up in less than a month.
Right.
If anything, the points raised tonight show us that this is even more involved.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I think it is a series of workshops amongst the 5 of us and town council over how we craft something that what I'm hearing is not what we put out tonight, which is an outright ban. What I'm hearing is people would like to see something that says, yes, it can be allowed in the following way. And that is going to take more than us having a couple of conversations after Board of Selectmen meetings. It's going to be a series of workshops.
We may have to extend it, even though we promised we were going to make a decision by June.
We're
we
going
may
to
have
extend. Pete has already indicated.
Can I
Yes,
just
Tim.
make one comment about the participation? During during COVID, you made a lot of robocalls to the community. That would be very helpful if we're gonna have another meeting, if you really wanted
Yeah,
a lot of participation,
when
to do something like that.
Yeah, when we come up with something, I could certainly let that be known to the community.
Yeah, just to let us
Do
know
that,
that
you
the
gotta
meeting
move
is
it.
It's a good
happening.
idea.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah, because nobody, if people don't know, they don't come.
Or the text messages,
The
like
text
how,
is better,
how
yeah.
it was like, click here that you've received this text. But yeah,
I still have PTSD about having to send those out every.
It was a comfort on Friday.
It was, it was, it was.
I will relay my favorite COVID message story. I was walking across the green maybe 6 months after I'd started it. And somebody stopped me and said, "Thank you very much for the messages. I really appreciate it." And he said, "You know, you call me more often than my mother does." I didn't really know how to take that. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. We appreciate the input and the conversation. Thank you.
Valerie?
My son's business is here.
Today. We're gonna try. The problem is that we're meeting to 10 years.